Hello and welcome to Gishi Gaming Reviews, where each game is thoroughly and meticulously reviewed using the 100-point scoring system that I've developed. For a brief video explaining how my 100-point scoring system works, you can check out the link in the description below. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the game ULTROS from indie developer Huervo. There's one thing that pisses me off. It's when content creators and journalists spread misinformation. It's actually a big part of why I started this channel in the first place. So when I heard ULTROS being falsely labeled as a roguelite, I knew it was my responsibility to set the record straight. So what exactly is a roguelite? Well, according to Wikipedia, in order for a game to be considered a roguelite, it needs to feature two very specific mechanics: permadeath and procedurally generated mechanics. ULTROS has neither of these, and is for all intents and purposes a Metroidvania. It does, however, feature a unique time loop mechanic that resets your abilities and items, as well as the game's enemies and bosses at certain points in the story. Luckily, thanks to several other mechanics that are in play, you never have to actually completely return to square one, and you're never required to fight the same boss more than once. The gardening in ULTROS is probably the most important of these mechanics. Several different types of seeds can be acquired throughout the game, which can be planted at predetermined locations on the map. They look like this. Any seeds you plant will not only grow into a plant, but will continue to grow through the game's time loops, actually growing larger with each individual loop. This not only opens access to previously unreachable map areas, but also opens up shortcuts across various map locations. Plants also provide fruit, which is used as a healing item, and also raises your nutrient levels, which are used to unlock abilities on the Cortex, ULTROS' version of an ability tree. Different abilities require specific amounts of up to 4 different nutrient types to unlock, and new abilities open up other abilities further down the Cortex. All of this is reset at the beginning of each loop, but there is one item that, when obtained, can lock your abilities across all time loops. These items can be found encased in crystal in hidden nooks and crannies across the map. For each one you collect, you are able to permanently lock down one ability on the Cortex across all time loops, and chosen abilities can be changed at any time, allowing you to lock down abilities further down the Cortex earlier in the loop as you progress through the game. The final loop-defying mechanic is the Extractor, which is obtained shortly after starting each loop. It allows you to double jump once it's obtained, allowing you to access most areas of the map outside of the center hub, also known as the living quarters. The Extractor also gains a new ability each time you defeat a boss. Most of the Extractor's abilities are in one way or another related to gardening, allowing you to do things like cut down plants that are blocking your way, or completely dig up a seed in order to replant it somewhere else. New abilities are permanently installed on the Extractor, so every time you retrieve it after starting a new loop, it'll be equipped with every ability you've obtained so far. This allows you to skip over previously explored areas of the map rather than having to backtrack every time you begin at a new loop. The looping mechanic in ULTROS and the other mechanics that support it are designed not only to push the boundaries of what is possible in a Metroidvania, but also to define its story, which starts out by introducing you to a small but interesting cast of NPCs that are more or less oblivious to the fact that they're stuck in a recurring loop. Story, which starts off being interesting and full of potential, quickly devolves into a mess of incomprehensible sci-fi gibberish. Memories are hidden around the sarcophagus that, from what I can tell, are intended to deepen your knowledge of the lore in ULTROS, but are so full of unexplained concepts and pretentious-sounding made-up gibberish words that the only thing they actually do is just further confuse a plot that already feels like it was written by someone who ate too many weed edibles. While it is sometimes entertaining to see how certain NPCs behave after having their memories removed while things quietly change around them, any hint of a comprehensible storyline is swallowed up by the chaos unfolding around you. This psychedelic approach towards storytelling unfortunately turns the plot of ULTROS into a confusing mess. Luckily, the same aesthetic has the opposite effect on the graphics, which are hand-drawn and absolutely stunning at times, introducing players to a psychedelic landscape drenched in bright neon colors that manages to stay interesting and visually appealing throughout the game's 12 to 15 hour runtime. However, the constant barrage of visual stimuli can be a bit overwhelming at times. It's always nice to see game developers experimenting with unique art styles, and ULTROS is no exception. But it would have been nice to see them exercise a little restraint every once in a while, rather than being blasted with a constant explosion of color saturation. ULTROS' soundtrack serves to further enhance the overall psychedelic mood of the game. Map exploration segments are typically supplemented with mellow, often haunting melodies that range from melancholic to mysterious and perfectly encapsulate the mood that the developers were trying to capture. Music during action sequences and boss fights, however, is hit or miss, and has a tendency to sometimes feel out of place or anticlimactic. But overall, the audio in ULTROS is pretty decent, even if it does sometimes miss the mark. Despite being generally successful in the areas of graphics and audio, and even featuring some genuinely unique and groundbreaking mechanics, ULTROS regrettably falls short in terms of controls and actual design. Let's start with the controls. Early game combat starts out simple enough. One button to attack, use multiple times in succession to chain attacks, and hold for a charged attack. Unlocking abilities on the Cortex allows you to add a variety of moves to your arsenal that can be chained together with your regular attacks. And the game actually encourages you to mix it up and use a variety of different moves by having it affect the quality of enemy drops. A good variety of attacks will score you a high quality item, rich with nutrients and healing properties, while mashing the attack button will land you a bloody pulp that barely has any effect. This is actually a really cool system, in theory. Unfortunately, it feels like the character's moveset was designed by someone that's never actually played a Metroidvania. Defensive maneuvers, like the Himsa Assault, trigger so slowly that they miss the enemy every time. You have two aerial maneuvers that you can learn that are basically the same move, and both of them attack downwards. And there aren't any other attacks that hit at an upward angle, so good luck hitting flying enemies. The wall jump looks like this. It actually launches you away from the wall. The air dash makes you dash backwards. It's a total mess. Movement feels awkward and disjointed, and it makes any kind of platforming to reach hidden areas a chore. There's also no option to remap any controls because of the way your different attacks are set up, so you are permanently stuck with the basic attack and dash buttons right next to each other. Fortunately, none of the enemies or bosses you encounter are very difficult, so the awkward controls shouldn't prevent you from being able to actually progress through the game. What will prevent you from progressing through the game, though, is the level design, which is absolute trash. Trying to navigate your way through the sarcophagus frequently feels a bit like smashing your head against a brick wall. ULTROS doesn't have a non-linear map like a lot of Metroidvanias do. It actually wants you to follow a very specific path, so much so that it actively punishes you for straying from that path. Take one wrong turn, and suddenly you're stuck in an area that you don't have the abilities or haven't already opened the proper doors to get out of, and forced to return to the main menu and restart from the beginning of your current time loop. To make things worse, more than half the time you have no indication of where you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to actually do. The game will sometimes give you map markers that are inaccurate or don't clear after you reach them. There are no side quests, only the main storyline, which only ever indicates you are on the correct path once you reach key points on the map, and even then, straying from that path for too long will cause key events like doors opening not to trigger, forcing you again to have to restart the loop over and over until you get it right. Sometimes traveling way too far off the intended path into an area that you can't get out of will even cause the map and menu to lock up. And at that point, when your menu screens won't work, or map markers won't clear, or doors start opening and closing with a mind of their own, it's often hard to know whether it's a bug or just piss poor design. My guess is probably a little of both, and while there's no other major bugs or glitches that I stumbled across, key events not triggering when they're supposed to does severely impact gameplay. The enemy design in ULTROS is not much better. Not counting bosses, the number of unique enemies to encounter is so low you can probably count it with your fingers, with the same enemies just being repeated across all map areas. Not even different colored versions of the same enemies with stronger attacks, just the same 9 or 10 enemies throughout the entire game. Their attacks are repetitive and predictable, and combat quickly becomes so stale and boring that just avoiding them altogether quickly becomes the norm. Fortunately, there is an ability on the Cortex that makes enemies less likely to notice you, and it will quickly become your best friend. Some of the boss fights, which there are one of per map area, are still fun and challenging, but not enough to make it worth the drudgery of trying to navigate through this mess of a game. I hate having to admit this, but I didn't actually finish Ultros. I did make it to the final loop though, before I got so sick of running around in circles that I finally gave up. So, to summarize, ULTROS is not a difficult game, but because of its bad design, it does require a tremendous amount of patience, and to me, running around in circles and repeatedly restarting time loops because you are stuck in areas that you lack the ability to escape from is not fun. It honestly really is a shame though, because the graphics and artwork are top notch, and the mechanics that the game is built around are very interesting and unique, and had the potential to make this game something really special, but unfortunately, as is the case for many indie projects, it falls apart in its execution. If anything, ULTROS should be a reminder to indie developers to make sure to put enough time and effort into developing your game to make sure that it doesn't suck. If they had just taken a little more time to work out the kinks in controls and level design and design a more diverse range of enemies, ULTROS could have been something really special. Maybe even a top tier Metroidvania. The game as a whole just feels incomplete, almost like they were in such a rush to complete it that they had to make massive sacrifices in its overall quality. It kinda sucks because I was honestly really excited for this game, and I wanted it to be good, but as it stands, ULTROS is a poorly designed, sloppy, confusing mess. The total score that I gave for ULTROS is a 5.5 with a difficulty level of 4. Hey, thank you so much for checking out my review. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if there's any other games that you'd like to see me review. Until next time, this is Gishi. Checking out.